Imagine someone who, because of a 3-minute delay, missed a flight that later crashed. Imagine a woman who, on a sudden impulse, changed buses only to avoid a tragedy. Now imagine thousands of stories like these, scattered across the globe, repeating with unsettling frequency. Are these just coincidences or pure chance? Or could there be something or someone behind it all? What if every detail of your life, even the most random moments, were actually connected to a greater purpose? And what if what we call luck is really a plan unfolding before our eyes? Throughout history, philosophers, theologians, and scientists have debated this question. Does chance truly exist, or is there meaning behind everything? We live in a fast-paced generation, one that demands quick answers, logical explanations, and full control. But when life slips beyond our calculations, when something unlikely happens, whether it's a loss, a narrow escape, or an unexpected reunion, we're forced to face a deeper mystery. Some say it's all random, the result of chaos and cold mathematics. But others believe in an invisible hand, shaping the unseen, guiding even what seems uncertain. In this documentary, we will dive into this profound dilemma. We'll explore powerful testimonies, ancient biblical texts, scientific research, and historical records. We'll listen to people who survived the impossible and to those who found meaning in moments that once seemed meaningless. Get ready to uncover a truth that might change the way you see everything. Because in the end, what we call a coincidence may just be the beginning of a plan we don't yet understand. And your own life might be part of that very plan. We've all heard stories that seem to defy logic. Someone who changes their path at the very last moment and narrowly avoids a deadly accident. Someone who postpones a trip without any clear reason and ends up spared from a tragedy. Or even a child who's delayed by just 5 seconds and escapes something terrible. On September 11th, 2001, a New York City executive missed his subway by only 2 minutes. Annoyed by the delay, he called his office to let them know he'd be late. And because of that phone call, he never stepped into the elevator of the World Trade Center that morning. Minutes later, a plane hit the tower and he survived. Was that luck or destiny? Or could it have been something greater acting behind what we can't see? Science presents theories based on statistics, probabilities, and synchronicity. It suggests that our brains are naturally wired to search for patterns, even where none exist, simply to make sense of chaos. But what happens when those patterns become frequent? When all the small details fit together so precisely that they appear to have been arranged by something unseen? Is it really all random, or could there be an invisible logic guiding the unfolding of events? Long before neuroscience existed, the Bible already pointed to this possibility. The book of Proverbs boldly states, "The lot is cast into the lap, but every decision is from the Lord." That verse challenges the very idea of randomness. And another one says, "A man's heart plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps." It's as if everything is already being led, even when we think we're making all the choices. Still, not everyone accepts this belief. Thinkers like Nietzsche, Sartre, and Camus argued that the universe has no direction, no design. They believed everything is ruled by chance, and that both suffering and joy are meaningless random events without any higher purpose. To them, humans are simply trying to force meaning into a world governed only by chaos. And yet, there are countless stories around the world, from different religions, cultures, and time periods, about unlikely events that changed lives, saved people, and shifted destinies. Are they coincidences? Maybe. But how many coincidences have to happen before they stop looking like chance? How many accounts need to be recorded before we start to wonder if something bigger is going on? In psychology, we talk about synchronicity events connected not by cause and effect, but by meaning. Carl Jung believed such moments carried messages from the collective unconscious, like the world's soul speaking through patterns. In quantum physics, some scientists explore the possible influence of consciousness on reality, suggesting our awareness may shape outcomes in ways we don't fully grasp. And so we return to the question that continues to provoke and fascinate. Does chance really exist? Or is there purpose behind it all? If there's purpose, then there's intention. If there's intention, there's someone behind it. And if someone is behind it, we're not alone. And if we're not alone, even the painful moments might hold meaning we've yet to understand. In this documentary, we'll explore that mystery. We'll hear real testimonies, examine scientific studies, look at historical records, dig into biblical wisdom, and question what we've always taken for granted. Because maybe, just maybe, chance was never real at all. The idea that nothing happens by chance is far from new. It stretches across millennia, cultures, and religions. In some of the oldest texts known to humanity, we find clear signs that life was once seen as a sacred web of meaning, where every thread was connected to a higher will. In the Old Testament, God is repeatedly revealed as one who operates through details, guiding events and people with astonishing precision, like when Joseph was sold by his brothers, taken to Egypt, falsely imprisoned, and then, years later, rose to become governor and the very one who saved his family from famine. He himself would later say, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Genesis 50:20. A story that seemed to unravel from the beginning, but with time revealed a hidden purpose beneath the pain. In another passage from the book of Ruth, a young foreign widow decides to follow her mother-in-law to an unfamiliar land, and while picking leftover grain in what seemed to be a random field, she meets Boaz, the man who would become her husband and a direct ancestor of Jesus Christ. The text reads, "As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, but that coincidence altered the course of history forever." Interestingly, the original Hebrew here doesn't use the word for luck as we know it, but instead employs a subtly ironic phrase meaning something like accidentally on purpose. In apocryphal writings such as the Book of Enoch, there are references to angels watching the paths of human beings and recording their actions, hinting at a reality that is carefully observed and divinely guided. Likewise, among the Dead Sea Scrolls, we find texts describing the role of the sons of light, individuals chosen even before birth to fulfill specific purposes in the world. These texts, although not part of the official biblical canon, are taken seriously by scholars and archaeologists alike as they reflect real beliefs held during the Second Temple period. In Qumran, excavations uncovered scrolls that speak of the predestination of certain groups, some chosen for good, others for evil, strengthening the notion that nothing in life was viewed as accidental or left to chance. The first-century Jewish historian Flavius Josephus also documented that many Jews at the time believed God directed every single event in history, including the most violent and chaotic ones, such as wars, betrayals, and the collapse of empires. He describes men who, before making major decisions, would fast and pray for days, seeking to understand the timing and movement of God in their lives. In early Christian tradition, letters written by leaders such as Paul and Peter declared that believers were called according to a purpose and that all things work together for good for those who love God. Romans 8:28. Even persecutions and imprisonments were not viewed as interruptions or failures, but as necessary pieces of a greater design. Paul's journeys, for instance, though filled with shipwrecks, threats, and chains, ultimately led him to Rome, the very heart of the empire. These accounts, scattered throughout Scripture and supported by parallel historical records, form a compelling mosaic, an ancient and enduring conviction that nothing happens by chance, and that behind every encounter, every delay, every loss, and every victory, there is intelligence, direction, and meaning. And the more we study these records, the clearer it becomes that this perspective was not symbolic or poetic. It was taken literally, lived out daily, and even feared with reverence. For those ancient writers and prophets, randomness was never an option. Everything had its appointed time. Everything had a reason. Everything had a purpose. For centuries, chance was believed to be nothing more than a failure of understanding, a human way of naming what we couldn't yet explain, and for many, everything had a reason. That is, until modern science began to challenge that certainty. As telescopes became more powerful and laboratories more precise, we discovered a universe seemingly governed by rigid mathematical laws, but also by something deeply unsettling: the unpredictable. Quantum physics, in studying the behavior of subatomic particles, revealed that at the most fundamental level of reality, nothing is entirely predictable. An electron might be here, or there, or in both places at once. The mere act of observing an experiment can alter its outcome. This discovery baffled even the most skeptical scientists, among them Albert Einstein, who famously reacted by saying, "God does not play dice with the universe." But what few people know is that some of the very founders of quantum physics began to wonder whether behind this apparent unpredictability there might be a hidden intelligence, a universal consciousness that made randomness nothing more than an illusion. Niels Bohr and Werner Heisenberg went so far as to suggest that the observer actively participates in shaping reality, as if our choices help determine what is real, and that led to bold hypotheses. What if the universe responds to consciousness? What if the events we call luck or coincidence are actually responses to invisible, deeper, perhaps even spiritual intentions? In 2002, a study conducted by Princeton University revealed that machines built to generate random numbers, supposedly operating purely by chance, began to show slight but measurable deviations during major emotional events shared by large groups, such as global tragedies or celebrations. It was as if chance itself could feel the emotional weight of human experience. Coincidence? Or could it point to evidence of a hidden link between what we feel and what actually happens in the world around us? Psychological research adds more layers to this mystery. People who believe that everything happens for a reason tend to notice more meaningful coincidences throughout their lives. They find purpose where others might only see randomness. But is that just a matter of perspective, or could belief itself have the power to shape the path ahead? Jesus, on several occasions, said, "Let it be done according to your faith," suggesting that belief might function as a force that helps bring reality into form. And that leads us to a deeper question. What if chance only exists for those who don't believe in a greater purpose? What if chaos is just the visible surface of something that, over time and with deeper understanding, reveals a hidden order? Some scientists are beginning to suggest that layers of reality remain beyond our grasp, and that faith might not be opposed to reason, but instead offer a different way of perceiving the same truth. It may be challenging to accept, even uncomfortable at first, but here's something few people realize. Beneath the chaos, there may be choreography. Maybe what we call chance is just the label we've used for the pieces of the story we haven't yet connected. But what if we're closer than ever to seeing the full picture? If everything has a purpose, then nothing is in vain. That may be the most profound implication of everything we've explored so far. If there is a logic behind what appears to be chaos, then our pain, our delays, our meetings, and our losses all carry a meaning that goes far beyond what our eyes can see. And that changes everything. It changes the way we face suffering, the way we deal with waiting, the way we interpret the silence of God. We begin to understand that what looks like defeat today may actually be the quiet construction of something much greater. If God works behind the scenes, then even his silence is a form of action. The Bible never promised a life without hardship, but it always pointed to a God who turns tears into paths. Joseph didn't understand his imprisonment until he saw what God brought out of it. Ruth didn't understand her loss until she saw what God had built from it. We too often won't understand in the moment. But faith isn't about understanding. It's about continuing even when nothing makes sense. Science, when it approaches mystery, often bows before the vastness of what it has yet to comprehend. Theology, when it touches the unexplainable, kneels before a God who works in the unseen. And we, when we accept that not everything needs to make sense right now, create space for purpose to reveal itself in its own perfect time. That realization gives us rest. It lifts the weight of needing to control everything. It frees us from the anxiety of thinking life is just a game of luck or chance. And most of all, it invites us to trust. If every event carries a purpose, then our days truly matter. Every decision, every yes and no, every door opened, and every path denied holds meaning. And that realization calls us to responsibility. We're not just leaves drifting in the wind. We're part of a story written by an author who sees what we don't. Believing this isn't denial, it's living with direction. It means that even when everything feels like it's falling apart, God is still building. It's understanding that the delay that frustrates may be the protection that saves. It's seeing that today's pain might become tomorrow's healing. Purpose moves even when everything else stands still. That shifts how we read the Bible. It stops being distant and becomes a map full of clues, stories that reflect ours, and promises still unfolding. It changes how we see the world. It's no longer just random chaos, but a space filled with meaning. It changes how we see God. He stops being a spectator and reveals himself as author, guide, father who notices every detail. And most of all, it changes how we see ourselves. Because if everything has a purpose, then so do we. We're not here by accident. We're here by design. So if there is always a purpose from God in everything, then our life was never an accident. This is the truth that challenges us the most, and at the same time comforts us the most. Because if nothing is by chance, then even the wounds we carry can be turned into healing. Even mistakes can become lessons. Even losses can make way for new paths. This revelation stirs us because it reminds us of something we often forget. We are part of a greater story. We are not alone in the universe, nor drifting aimlessly like dust in the wind. There is an invisible thread connecting every step, every encounter, every tear, every smile. There is a hand that writes even on the crooked lines of our life. And that changes the way we see ourselves. Because if God uses even what seems random, then our existence carries eternal significance. You are not the result of a genetic coincidence. You weren't born in the wrong time, nor did you end up in this family or this city by mistake. There is a purpose in that too. But accepting this truth requires faith, and faith is not a feeling. It's choosing to believe even when we don't understand. It's like walking through the fog, trusting that there is a path beneath your feet. Many times we can't see 2 meters ahead, but we keep going because we know the road exists. That's what living by faith is like, trusting that God knows where He is leading us, even when the map hasn't yet been revealed. This certainty touches our deepest fears. The fear of loss, the fear of not being in control, the fear that everything might end in nothing. But in the presence of faith, fear loses its strength. Because if everything has a purpose, then even the darkest valleys are part of the journey. The psalmist said, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. That is the heart of faith, not the absence of valleys, but the presence of God in them. And this also calls us to action. It's not enough to know there is a purpose. We must live as those who believe in it. That means forgiving when our heart cries out for revenge, because maybe the purpose of pain is to teach us how to love. It means starting over when everything inside us wants to give up, because maybe the purpose of the fall is to show us we can rise. It means trusting when life feels like endless silence, because maybe the purpose of waiting is to prepare us for something greater. Everything changes when we understand that even the simplest detail can carry eternity. A hug, a word, a gesture of kindness. Chance calls it coincidence, but faith calls it purpose. And if we start living this way, attentive to the invisible, sensitive to the movement of God, we will discover that nothing goes unnoticed. The delay that irritates might save, the unexpected meeting might transform, the painful loss might open doors we would never have had the courage to walk through. We are called to trust. We are called to walk, not by what we see, but by what we believe. And if we embrace this truth, life will no longer be just a sequence of days. It will become a living purpose, pulsing in every moment until the last breath. Because in the end, there is no such thing as chance. There is a God who writes stories, and your story is still being written. Perhaps the greatest discovery is not an exact answer, but the realization that chance has never had as much room as we once believed. Ancient records point to a God who moves in the details. Modern science is beginning to admit that what we call randomness might be hiding a deeper, unseen pattern. And real-life stories show us that yes, there is a kind of logic, even when it only becomes clear after the pain, after the waiting, after faith. Nothing is in vain. Nothing goes unnoticed. And when that becomes a truth within us, even what once felt like loss begins to shine with the meaning of eternity. We are not at the mercy of chance. We are in the hands of a God who sees the invisible, who acts in silence, who turns chaos into a path forward. And when we trust in this, even the grayest days gain purpose. Because everything works together. Because everything teaches something. Because everything, absolutely everything, can be used by God for a greater purpose. Maybe we'll never fully understand the reasons. Maybe life will keep surprising us with questions too big for words. But as we walk forward, we no longer walk alone. We know there is a plan, and we are part of it. Life then stops being a game of probabilities and becomes a mission filled with meaning. So here's the question you'll carry with you from now on. What if nothing that ever happened to you was by accident? To God be all the glory, because even when we don't understand, He is still writing.